do feel like unis could do more in getting people prepared, even if it's, something as simple as CV or interview practice with an analyst and or a director of football, or what to expect in that situation. Because again, like I get sent lots of CVs from students, and to be honest, the majority of them are not very good. Do you know what I mean? Like
No.
in terms of the CV, so like that's an easy, like it's not hard to make a good CV if you're taught how to, or you look. So I feel like there's lots
And
of
the irony of it is, Chris, the irony of it is the people that will send those CVs will
hmm,
invariably have presentation,
yeah,
creativity
yeah,
on their CV listed as skills or qualities,
yeah,
but then their CV doesn't reflect that. So
yeah,
if then you as an employer are challenging those things straight away,
hmm,
because if they're putting presentation skills, creativity on their CV,
yeah, yeah.
but their CV doesn't reflect that, you then question everything else around their CV.
100%. I said this so many times. Like I remember when I was doing my CV back, and it was designed like, because obviously we were at the time designing things like match reports. That's one thing that you would do, like these templates
Yeah.
and stuff. So it is an outlet for you to show how you can design something, and the tools now that are available to design. You don't need to be an expert on Photoshop or something. Like there's literally stuff you can make a fantastic CV in like 20, 30 minutes, and
Yeah.
just kind of tweak that. So I think there's a lot of quick wins that unis could do, like one being that in terms of like as well. I know not everyone asks for a cover letter, but the majority of people don't even know what a cover, like how to write a cover letter. In my opinion, like the cover letters
No,
we
no, no.
receive, and it's just like things like that, and then I mean, it's hard to prep for. Interviews are kind of a nerve-wracking situation to be in. Like it's hard to kind of say, oh, we did this at uni, and I'm now clued up on interviews. But you can practice those kind of things. Just on that.
It's such an important skill,
Mm,
and I suppose we did that at, again, the master's course I developed and wrote at Chichester. We had, as part of our work placement module, they had to, I come up with a hypothetical job.
mm,
So I'd bring together tons and tons of job applications from different sports, and
yeah,
then based on the sport of interest for that student, so it could be netball, could be hockey, could be rugby, could be football, they would then get a job advert. And then what they then had to do is they had to respond to that job advert, submit a CV, submit a cover letter. And then the cover letter was really important because, again, people don't necessarily maybe request a cover letter, they just want your CV.
yeah,
But actually, that cover letter as an assessment provides a really valuable opportunity for them to reflect on who they are, what they can do, and
yeah,
how they can sell that with a lot of
yeah,
like
yeah,
intent.
yeah,
And then we also used to, do an interview, and we used to do it as like a dragon's den. There'd be like three or four of us in terms of academic staff on the panel. So we try and make it, they would have to come suited and booted. So it'd feel
yeah,
real
yeah,
and just really nicely. They loved it. But I used to have a camera literally over my shoulder and we'd record it.
yeah.
And then they had to go back and reflect on it.
That's
And
really good.
then,
Yeah.
and then we gave them. And then the other thing, just to link into what you said, is the other assessment that we had to do was a reflective piece. But
Mm,
within that, and it links into that professional identity thing, is based on their reflections, they then had to come up with almost like a framework or a summary of then how all of their experiences fed into now what they thought their professional identity was. So again, it's just like you say, it's really quick wins.
yeah, yeah,
It's a challenge on scale if you've got a large number of students because it takes
mm,
time.
yeah,
But actually, if you've got smaller cohorts or if you can manage the logistics of it, those sort of authentic things are just massive, and it puts the students in such good stead. There's
yeah,
such key skills to have.
yeah. Because the CV one, especially to me, is so simple. Because if what you said about the job with 1,000 applicants, there are like jobs literally do get several hundred applications for analysts, and if you've got to go through that many CVs, you are, whether rightly or wrongly, you are going to do some skimming. And if you just skim and it's just boring, or it doesn't grab your attention, you're not going to remember that CV. But if it's good, well structured, well set out, it's in your mind then as the person that's going to hire that position. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just massive for me. So yeah, perfect. So yeah, lots of things to kind of unpack there. But in terms of then where to go next, so let's kind of go. You mentioned strengths and weaknesses, and obviously interviews came up there. One thing I'd like to ask is the question. When you're in an interview and someone ask you for your strengths and weaknesses, your strengths is a
Yeah.
pretty easy thing to answer, in my opinion. You can say some strengths and why you're good at them. How would you advise someone to answer? If you're in an interview and someone say, "What's your weakness?" What would you say? How can a student kind of navigate that question, obviously correctly, without making them sound that they're not right for the job, or do you know what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say? So how would you say, what would you advise on that kind of question if that came up in the interview?
The challenge with interviews is just sort of generally is interviews are a real skill, and
Mm.
I'm not professing to be the best at them by any stretch, but you have to. There's a couple of things people need to be mindful of, and especially students when they go into these environments. Is one is obviously about the answer,
Yeah,
but two is how you frame or layer that answer. It's like the story that you tell, and
yeah,
I think sometimes, particularly students, they get caught up with trying to answer the question, and
mm.
they'll say stuff and they might say it before they've properly thought about the question. So you see the number of students sort of jumping in and going and
Yeah,
answering a question before they've probably thought about, you
mm.
know. But equally, going back to what we said about having that awareness of strengths and weaknesses, if you've really got that self-awareness of yourself, you know those things straight away. So you can then think about how you can frame or layer that answer.
Mm.
So my key advice in terms of weaknesses would be really, really study that job descriptor. Like, it's impossible to be an expert in everything. You know,
Yeah,
if you think of all the different skills that are required to be an analyst, you cannot be brilliant at everything.
mm.
It's impossible. You know, you cannot be a feedback expert. You cannot be a data viz expert. You cannot have, you know, an exceptional level of game understanding. You can't have exceptional technical skills, all at once.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
there's got to be
yeah,
some sort of gaps. So again, if you understand what the component parts are, and equally, if you then really study the job spec and go, okay, right, I don't know, say for sake of argument, game understanding is a weakness.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. But then what you might do is then highlight how your level of game understanding has helped in your previous roles or whatever it might be. So give some evidence. So you almost flip it into a strength.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you say what it is, but then you think of, okay, right, how can you demonstrate your capability with that? But then equally, what sort of support, what sort of mentoring, what sort of courses, what sort of training do you need to do to
mm.
then develop that?
Yeah,
So I think one thing is admitting the weakness. Like, everyone's got them, so it's fine. Don't be afraid to say what they are.
yeah,
But then how you structure that answer in terms of how you frame it and how you can give evidence that, you're still good in that area, but it's maybe
yeah, yeah,
just not the level that you'd want.
yeah, yeah,
But then also, how can you then demonstrate that self-awareness to go, okay, what's my short, medium, longer term sort of drivers in terms of addressing this? So it
mm.
might be going on a, UA for B license or A license or whatever they are now. Yeah, level 3, level 4, whatever they are.
Yeah,
So I think one is, don't be afraid. Everyone's got weaknesses.
mm.
Two, absolutely fundamentally make sure you know what they are.
Yeah,
And three, consider really how you frame and that narrative and that story.
yeah,
So how can you demonstrate evidence that you're okay in that area, so it's not a massive deficiency, so people won't look at it negatively.
yeah.
And equally, how can you demonstrate where the gaps might be, but also what support you might need when you're in there. Yeah, and that's just an
Yeah, yeah,
example.
yeah, definitely. Because not obviously not all interviews are the same, but a lot of the questions that interviewers ask are similar. So you can, if you've got an interview for any student out there, if you've got an interview, you can just go online and look at common interview questions and just have in your mind what you will want to say and reflect that back to your CV and the skills that you've got. So if you are prepared, at least half, if you half expect, if you ask me a question in an interview and I kind of already knew you might ask me that, Matt, I'm probably going to answer it better and more calmly.
Yeah,
So that can make a massive difference. And I think if you do that as well, you are a lot less flustered and you are more confident because I can't remember, I think it might have been Luke at Brentford I asked, because I asked him a question. Obviously, he interviews people, obviously, to bring them in as analysts. And
mm,
he, like a lot of others, it's not just about the skills that you've got. It's also, will you fit into the group of already, will you fit in? Are you a right fit? Will
yeah.
they kind of see you as a person that they will get along with, because they're going to have to spend too many hours a week with you to be
Yeah,
honest.
yeah, yeah.
It's about getting your
You
personality
see those
across as
people
well.
far more than you see your families, unfortunately. And
Yeah.
again, that's the thing that they don't necessarily people don't appreciate. But if you think,
Mhm.
particularly with some of the calendars that you've got, you might be in a hotel with someone on Christmas Eve, or
Yeah, yeah,
Christmas Day. If
yeah.
you've got a Boxing Day fixture, I know the fixtures are a lot kinder now than they were back in the day.
Mm.
But analysts would be traveling up and down the country or during holidays or whatever it might be, going away on tours.
Yeah.
And I think you've made a really, really valuable point, again, just generally in terms of interviews, is let down your barriers.
Mm.
Like, people don't want to see the interview version of you. They
Yeah.
want to see you.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
equally, your character, your personality, and it's and you'll always, within an interview, you'll always get like, you know, tell me about yourself, tell me about why you want this job, tell me how you can do the job.
mm,
Yeah, they're the three things generally, and you'll get a load of questions around those sort of three themes. But it's
yeah.
basically, who are you, why do you want this job, and how can you demonstrate that you can do that job?